Our speaker here is Councillor Hugh Lewis, who's Councillor for Dunleary, Rathdown. He was a member of the flotilla that went to try to bring aid to Gaza a few years ago, and he's also been to Gaza himself. So he was going to speak for about 10 or 15 minutes, and I'll open it up for any questions or points anyone would like to make then.
Thanks very much, Alan. Well, the topic of conversation is how Palestine can be free, and it's probably difficult enough to fit in the space of 10 or 15 minutes, either the context of the conflict in Palestine, the occupation, and then to pose a solution as well. But to me and to many in the Palestinian solidarity community, so to speak, the solution is brought about by the context and the problem, and the inception of Israel itself has been a very unique state. Just to touch on the history briefly, Israel and the idea of Israel, the idea of Zionism, was reactivated in the kind of late 19th century by Theodor Herzl, and was a reaction to racism against Jewish people, pogroms across Europe, and was a reaction to injustice against Jewish people. But unfortunately, not a very equitable solution by any means, and certainly not a solution that anyone on the left should support or did support. In fact, one of the main supporters of the idea of Zionism was fascists from the inception of Nazism across Europe. In fact, the original supporters of it, in terms of dealing with the Jewish problem, as many right-wing Nazis would have seen this as being what better way to deal with it than the creation of a specific Jewish-only state. So that's kind of the context of how Israel came about. In the late 19th century, when Zionism was being revived again, the population of Palestine consisted of about 86% Muslims, and the rest being Christians and Jewish people. So it's very important to understand that the population of Israel as it currently now stands, that region, 100, 150 years ago was drastically different. So the idea, first of all, that Israel is somehow a return to the homeland for many Jewish people just simply isn't true. In fact, it was one of the only parts of the world where there wasn't pogroms against Jewish people at the start of the 20th century. In fact, the Jewish population actually flourished under Muslim control. And Palestine itself has obviously been under occupation from various different forces, from the Ottoman Empire, the Romans, the British as well, and most recently the Israelis. So the history of Palestine has never to have, for the Palestinians, the indigenous population, never have a recognised state, or a state as we would see it, even though their own culture certainly is embedded in the place historically. Zionists and Israelis tend to dismiss the fact that Palestinians actually lived in Palestine before 1948. So, the inception of Israel itself back in 1948, up until the point of the Holocaust, didn't actually have too much support. There was, of course, emigration to Israel during the start of the 19th century, but it didn't become very popular until after the Holocaust. It got international support from the international community. And the partition plan was drawn up. How Israel came about is crucial, I think, to the solution in terms of what is going to be proposed as an equitable solution to everybody there. It was created on the basis of ethnic cleansing. This has been historically been proven to be accurate. 750,000 Palestinians, 500 Palestinian villages. We're talking even to the point of changing the geography of Palestine and the environment of it, where it culled thousands of olive trees, for example, and replaced them with trees from Europe. That's just an example of the type of manufacture that went into the creation of Israel itself in the first place. Up from 1948, obviously Israel had the support of the international community. Many on the left will argue that Palestine itself has been used as a kind of watchdog for American and indeed UK imperialism in the region. There has been numerous conflicts, the Six-Day War, the Arab-Israeli War, but crucially, the Arab countries surrounding Palestine, although they've been engaged in wars against Israel, it's, the wars they have engaged on, which isn't often commented on, never broached into what is, was known as the partition plan for Israel at the time. In other words, the conflict that they engaged in didn't broach into the old Israeli territories. It simply was left to Palestine. So there was no real effort, if you like, on behalf of the wealthy, I suppose, in the surrounding Arab countries. Israelis outnumbered the amount of Arab troops are fighting by 3-1 in many instances. So it's not necessarily a war of equals as proclaimed and has been done. So that is the context of what Israel is established in. Since 1948, the international community has supported it. Not people, obviously, although the left is guilty of itself in supporting the idea of Israel itself. There are those on the left, such as the Workers' Party, that indeed would have argued at one stage that Israel was somehow progressive. And I think that myth has been well and truly smashed in more recent times. How do we, one, pose a solution towards the problem itself? First of all, if you look at the Palestinian resistance that has happened since its inception, the establishment of the PLO as a secular organisation, the fight against Israel and the numerous intifadas, every effort by the Palestinians obviously has been made to fight against Israel at various points in times. The intifadas, as they were known, were followed by numerous peace treaties, and I know I'm flying over history here, it's very hard to do it in 10-15 minutes, but basically every juncture that has been made in terms of peace agreements or sitting down and signing the Oslo Accord, every time Palestinians have put the hand out to try and make some sort of agreement, Israel has used this to further encroach into Palestinian lands, literally at every single juncture, and continues to do so, building illegal settlements in the West Bank, the construction of the apartheid wall, and the annexation of, first the occupation of Gaza and then the annexation of Gaza itself and the establishment of the blockades. It's been consistently tried and supported the idea of a two-state solution for Palestine and the efforts to sit down and come to Noble's peace agreement. And I said that at every juncture Israel has used this to further encroach into Palestinian lands and into Palestinian territory. The more recent conflict in Gaza, is part of it, as horrific as it is part of an ongoing blockade of Gaza and the mistreatment of Palestinians living within Gaza. When Israel pulled out of Gaza, Hamas democratically won the elections in Gaza. There's no doubt about that. I'm not a supporter of Hamas, but people in Gaza support a majority government being Hamas in Gaza, much the same as the Irish people, although I don't support Fine Gael, support the establishment of a Fine Gael government. So, Palestinians themselves have supported at most times people that are the representatives and leaders that are seen as being taken to fight Israel and not accepting agreements with Israel after the experience of these breaking down time and time again, and that from being in Gaza and talking to Gazans themselves, most people living in Gaza don't support, I would say, the kind of ideology of Hamas, but would support the idea of resistance towards Israeli occupation, and that's my experience when I went there, certainly, and it will be the experience across Palestine when you look through the history of these peace agreements, how Fatah benefited and how they didn't. But crucially, a number of things have to happen, I think, before there's any chance of a solution. I think the international community, much the same as against South African apartheid, and I will use the word apartheid because I think Israel is an apartheid state. The people across the globe, if you want, came out in support of the ANC in smashing apartheid in South Africa. And it was ultimately boycott actions like the one here in Ireland, in the Dunn Stores workers in the 1980s, that led to workers having confidence not to stock South African produce, putting pressure on the government then to issue sanctions against South Africa, and to start a wave of people power in support of the South African people. That's certainly what helps South Africa to free themselves from the injustices of South African apartheid. And, the leaders of the struggle to defeat apartheid in South Africa are fully in support of the boycott, divestment, sanctions campaign. Desmond Tutu, for example, a Protestant, he wouldn't probably subscribe as being too radical, fully supports the boycott, divestment, sanctions campaign.